That story about Jacob, I don't know if you remember, Jacob is my favorite person to hate in the Bible. Right? It's hard for me to find redeeming qualities about him. And yet he has two amazing experiences of God, including this one where he wrestles with God. And it's on his way to meet his brother, Esau. And Esau he has wronged throughout his life, from the beginning all the way through. And he is hidden from him for a number of years, decades really. And this is when he's coming back. When he's coming home. When he's trying to say, what's Esau going to do now? And let me just tell you that he's not very optimistic about the possibilities. And so do you see what he does? Before he crosses the Jabbok, he sends everybody else in front of him as a buffer. And that night he sits and wrestles with himself, with Esau, with what he thinks Esau will be, with God, as he sits in that space trying to figure out what next. You see, what's happening is he's stuck in a narrative. That narrative is of what his past has told him about himself and about his brother and about what will happen as he steps into this space. But I've learned that we all get caught in narratives. It's easy for us to hear a story that's already been told and assume that right now it's going to play out exactly the same way. That's not unlike our hero from To Serve With Love. His name is Thackeray. And he has a story about his life, something that he knows, who he is, and life is drawing something different from him. He's an engineer, but he finds himself, because of needing a job of some sort, in the North Key neighborhood, a tough neighborhood, full of tough kids. And he has to figure out how to hear differently than what he started.
Why do you want to be a teacher? Reasons. You've already tried to get an engineering post.
I tried for 18 months.
We have a blueprint in North Key. Most of our children are rejects from other schools. We have to help them as best we can. We have to teach them what we can and as much as we can. The local authorities are not totally on our side. At the moment you accept this position, you'll be entirely on your own. Of course, I am, so I can do everything we can to help you. But success and failure will depend entirely upon you. Now what to do?
I want the job, sir.
Good. And it's settled. Tomorrow you'll take over that.
Do you see the old narratives playing out? Why do you want to be a teacher? He can't even answer, just says reasons. Because he can't still define himself in that new role. And those kids, well, they're defined all too well. They're rejects from another school. But also, did you see the narrative of what the teachers had to be? All of them living out a story that someone had told them. He was the wrong sort of teacher, they were the wrong sort of students, and they're all playing this story. And they played it well. As he's talking to another teacher, the teacher said, "How's it going?" And he says, "Let's just say battle was joined." And it was quite a battle. They were doing all kinds of things. At one point, he leans against his desk, and it crumbles underneath him because someone's cut through the leg. They walk across those desks. They speak out of turn. They do whatever they can to disrupt him because, you see, they're living out the narrative that's been given to them. That disruptive teenage story that we've seen in a number of different movies. West Side Story, for example, where we say, look how disruptive they are, how they're the wrong sort. And they're all living that narrative. They're stuck in that old narrative, but aren't you sometimes stuck in some story that someone's told about you? or that you've told about yourself, stuck in some way of understanding life. You see, these kinds of stories beg us to ask the question of ourselves, where are we stuck? What is it that we're believing? Where is it that we're staying because that's the story? What can we be beyond that? We don't often want to ask because we already have the answers here. See, it's all about what we believe about ourselves and about the world around us, sometimes told by those others out there, sometimes defined by us, but we accept it. Maybe they're true. Maybe they used to be true. Maybe that's just made up. But oftentimes, we don't question those stories. Sometimes because we want them to be true, whether or not they are. In another movie that we're going to watch in a little bit, Collateral Beauty, the main character is a man named Howard. He owns this company. It's a dynamic company. He's talking to all of his employees, and he asks them a question. He says, what is your why? What is it that motivates you? What causes you to get out of bed? What gives meaning and purpose to your life? In Thackeray's case, what is it that makes you come to this school? And too often, his students have been seen only as their problems instead of that why. But we often do that. We've seen it the last couple weeks from our president, who decided that we should cut legal immigration in half, which will, of course, solve the illegal immigration problem. But see, that coupled with what we heard last week about this tweet about transgenders in the military, tell me that his wife seems to stem out of fear of who they might be, of what they might do, of what might happen, or fear of what somebody else will do to him politically because of that. And I believe the why behind those answers comes from a space of fear. A space where he's trying to hide from what might happen and run from that. But as our call to awareness said, the mind becomes a seedbed for those kinds of fears. So that the fear facts begin to tell us a story where suddenly what we say we believe become extenuating circumstances. And we forget to act in the way we say we believe. But Thackeray chooses differently. Thackeray looks at the fear around him, both within him towards those children, and from those children to him, and he chooses to speak a new narrative to himself as well as to them.
Those are out. They are useless to you. I suddenly realized that you are not sure that you will be adults in a few weeks, with all the responsibilities that implies. So, from now on, you will be treated as such by me and by each other. As adults. Responsible adults. Next, we are going to be reasonable with each other. We are just going to talk, you and I. You are going to listen without interruption, and when I am finished, one of you may have your say without interruption. Next.
Now you want something like, first one would leave me alone. Then I'd go out to the bathroom. But you know, I'd have to study at the bathroom, and even now I was waiting for a guy.
There are two ways to enter a room. One is like an adult, a lady with dignity. The other is like a brat. Miss Dare has just shown us the second way. Perhaps you would care to demonstrate the first.
And Pamela Dare sits there and looks at him for what seems long seconds. trying to decide, does she listen to this new story? Or does she play out the story she had? That brat story that she played so well just then, walking in. Or does she accept the new narrative? Does she step into that new narrative of what she can be? You see, they haven't had to be reasonable adults. No one's wanted to treat them that way. Everyone says, you're only this. And he chooses to say, no, there's something more that you are. And they have to decide, are they going to hear? Can they hear? Can they become that reasonable adult? When we tell the old narratives, those old stories about ourselves, either to ourselves or to others, we often deafen ourselves to the new story. We often make it impossible to hear what life is attempting to tell us. Like, for example, 3 weeks ago, there was a story up in the Tempe area. And I've been wanting to tell it because it's got such comedic qualities to it. A beer truck turns over near Tempe. And I wanted to say things like, ASU shut down for days. Right? It was too easy of a story because that's the old narrative, right? But there's a tragedy happening. What do we do in the midst of it? What is it that old narrative makes me not see, not hear, not step into? Life is attempting to tell us something. And if we get stuck, we will be ill-equipped for what life is bringing to us right now, especially whenever life gets rockier and our resources dwindle, even as the challenges in front of us grow. You see, as our contemporary reading said, we sometimes are looking at a space with white folks' blues. We have so much, and so little bumps get in our way. And sometimes we don't see that story out of other people's eyes that are seeing life as a struggle. But Sir, Mr. Thackeray, chooses to see a larger picture. He chooses to speak that larger picture to the students around him. He chooses to expect something out of himself and about them, and it's because he emerged from the same type of story. And he doesn't talk about how he emerged or maybe escaped from whatever his past was. But he does choose to speak that new story into their life, so that they can see something more than what they are in that moment, something more than the definition they've given to themselves. And because he's determined to help them emerge from what they are to what they can be. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote an amazing little book called Just Fear. And then he has, as he says here, essential wisdom for getting through this storm. How do we, in the midst of life, discover something beyond it, something more than just what that is? And he says this: in our daily lives, our fear causes us to lose ourselves. Non-fear is the basis of true happiness. And if you offer non-fear to someone, you are giving that person the best kind of gift. You see, that fear that often gets spoken in those old narratives make it so that we don't see something. Because you see, any narrative sees only a picture and makes it so that we are fearful to look beyond it. That non-fear causes our eyes to open wider, our hearts to see more than we've ever seen. Howard, in Collateral Beauty, has everything. He's doing well. Everything's going perfectly for him. And so he asks that question about why. What is your why? And then right afterwards, these strains of this haunting song began. It's a song by Kaleo, and it asks right Father, tell me, why do we get what we deserve? And way down we go. You see, it's a song about listening to that narrative that this is all we deserve, that this is all we get. And it's not an optimistic song, it's a downward-looking song, but it's the way we often turn when all we hear is the old narrative. But the old narratives come so easily, so readily to our hearts and to our ears, and we have to choose to listen differently. We don't even know sometimes that we're hearing the old stories. And so we have to consciously choose against it and move towards something more. Because Spirit always tells a different story than those old narratives, a larger story, more beyond what it is that we already know. Howard's life takes a turn way down because his daughter dies. And he and his wife Madeline have to figure out what do they do. And in the clip you're going to see, Madeline is talking to him and telling the story of how she heard someone speaking a new narrative to her, even as she was hearing the reality of her daughter dying.
I have something that I haven't told anyone. It doesn't involve letters or angels or anything like that, but it means something to me. They were preparing Olivia to say goodbye. And my husband was trying to calm my mother in the parking lot because she lost it. So I was alone. And I was sitting there in the waiting room at my mom and his hospital. And there was this woman sat next to me. And she asked me who I was about to lose. And I told her. And she looked at me and she said, just be sure to notice the collateral beauty. And she said it so casually. In the next room, my 6-year-old daughter was being taken off life support. And this woman says collateral beauty.
People don't know what to say, in those moments.
No, she did. I just didn't get it at the time.
You see, in those moments when there's lots of noise around us, in those moments that scream in loud voices and flash in bright colors, it is sometimes hard to be able to see that collateral beauty, that collateral joy, that collateral love that is always, always present. Because the other stuff takes our vision away. The other stuff captures our attention and draws us that way and makes it so that it hides all of that beauty and love. And we have to choose between the old story and that story that seems so small and hidden, that story of beauty and joy and love. See, that love gets hidden behind things like death and sickness and divorce and economics and war and competition and danger and even old age. All of those things which scream out this story. And we have to choose to hear that other story. We have to look for that other story behind all kinds of narratives that tell us all kinds of things and preach them as if it is the only story. But there's always collateral joy, collateral beauty, collateral love waiting. And we have to choose it. Michael Moore did a movie called where to invade next. And in that movie, he told stories that maybe were hidden from American eyes, and he asked us to consider these. And one of those stories was the story of Tunisia. And Tunisia is a country in North Africa that had a very repressive government. One of those things that your Republican friends often complain about, the Sharia-based hierarchy that is the worst of what can happen. But listen to what happened there. In 2011, they had a mostly peaceful revolution where that country, led by and large by the female voice there, spoke up and said something has to change. And the president at the time, who was quite the dictator, chose to step aside, chose to give up that space. He chose to step down so that a democracy could form. And he said this: "It was indeed a very difficult decision, but we made this moral choice because power isn't everything. Prayer comes before power. So does avoiding conflict and bloodshed." You see, he heard a different narrative. He wanted to hold on to the old narrative where he's in charge, but he heard a different narrative and stepped into that and let his country step into that. Jacob sat on this side of the Jabbok and sent all of his buffering agents on that side to protect him from how his brother would react. But when he finally built up the courage to step across that river, almost in a prodigal son type of way, his brother rushed to him and embraced him and said, "You're forgiven. We are brothers. Step into this time with me, this new space." And invited him to dinner. And Jacob sent his brother off, said, "You go on ahead of us." And then he took his family and went the other way, because he couldn't listen to that new narrative. Thackeray received a contract to do what was his old narrative. He received a contract to be an engineer. But you see, he was beginning to listen to that new contract. The contract that his relationship with those kids was calling into his heart. And he tore up that contract in order to be there with those children, those responsible adults that he was creating, that he was helping to create. You see, we can always hear that old narrative, but it rarely brings us to where we need to be. We need to hear the new narrative of love, which helps us choose different, to be different, to act different. Throughout the movie, Howard is met periodically by different characters. One of those characters is love, and she comes and speaks truth into his life.
Hi, Howard.
You gonna try again?
You don't like it when I'm sad?
No. Aren't you always sad?
No. No, I can be other things. I can be happy. I can be unexpected and unpredictable and sexy and warm and mysterious. And home. I'll be home now. Remember? Do you remember me?
Listen, all the fabric of life bullshit, save that for somebody else.
It's not bullshit. I know you don't believe me, but you have to trust me.
Trust you? Trust you?
Yes.
I did trust you. And you betrayed me. I saw you every day in her eyes. And I heard you in her voice when she laughed. And I felt you inside of me when she called me daddy. And you betrayed me. You broke my heart.
No. I'm in all of it. I'm the darkness and the light. I'm the sunshine and the storm. Yes, you're right. I was there in her laugh. but I'm also here now in your pain. I'm the reason for everything. I am the only why. Don't try and live without me, Harold. Please don't.
Love is the only why, but it's what you choose to love and how you choose to love and how you withhold that love or how you choose not to look through the eyes of love. Choose love. Let it motivate you. Let it change you. Let it draw you into whatever that news story is so that you and the world will be changed forever. Amen.